For more, we go to London, where we're joined by Madawi Al-Rasheed, a Saudi dissident visiting professor at the Middle East Center at the London School of Economics. She was stripped of her Saudi citizenship in 2005 for criticizing Saudi authorities. Her new piece in the New York Times is headlined, "Why King Salman Must Replace MBS." Her edited collection, titled Salman's Legacy, The Dilemmas of a New Era in Saudi Arabia, was published earlier this year. We welcome you to Democracy Now! Thank you so much for joining us. Professor Al-Rasheed, why don't you begin by responding to this latest news that President Trump has acknowledged that Jamal Khashoggi is probably dead?
Yes, but this is in line with the series of tweets and statements made by Mr. Trump from the very beginning on the 2nd of October. I think we are getting mixed messages, contradictory messages from the American president over the Khashoggi affair. Before I start, let me tell you something about myself. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I lived there, I grew up there, and I came to Britain in 1983 to pursue higher education. I was an undergraduate. I finished my undergraduate degree. I went on to write a PhD. And after finishing my PhD, somehow the Saudi regime found out that I wrote this PhD, and it was just about to be published. So they dug up the manuscript of my PhD from Cambridge University Library. They translated it into Arabic and sent it to the governor of Riyadh, who is now King Salman of Saudi Arabia. After reading that PhD manuscript, he called my father and said to him, "Do you know what your daughter has done? She has written this awful PhD that tarnishes the reputation of our country and our great founder, King Ibn Saud, the one who founded Saudi Arabia." So my father dismissed that phone call, and I went ahead and published my PhD, and it came as my first book under the title Politics in an Arabian Oasis. So far, during the last 24 hours, we talked about journalists and the plight of journalism in the modern world. We heard examples from all over the world about how journalism is now under threat.
I think it's a common interest. The U.S. has been supporting Saudi Arabia and guaranteeing the security of the regime since the 1940s, in fact, since the discovery of oil. And that was also a strategic relationship. Saudi Arabia, its geography, its location was extremely important during the Second World War. But after that, oil and geostrategic interests had made the two partners throughout the last half decades or more. But this doesn't mean that the relationship has always been harmonious. Of course, the two countries do not have a lot in common. And it is a joke when people say that the Americans and the Saudis have a lot of common values. In fact, there is just sheer interest that brings them together, but at the same time, there are schisms, and we saw how they could be materialized during times of crisis. So after 9/11, there was a tense relationship, but I think there are common interests on both sides of the relationship that kept it going against all odds and against also.
What are the Saudis afraid of? They seem to be so in control of the place.
Well, it is appearance, I think. The problem in Saudi Arabia is that society has changed a lot since the 1970s. Today, we have a large cohort of youth, or young people who are educated, who are using social media in a frenzy, I think, simply because other outlets are not allowed or banned. They have demanded political reform. And from 2001 to 2011, there were 12 petitions addressed to the king asking for political change. Basically, these petitions in a country like Saudi Arabia are the only way to engage the leadership and express the wish of a cross-section of society. They happen to be men, women, Islamists, non-Islamists. Some are called liberals, others are more towards the religious side, but all of them wanted real political change. So what did they want? They wanted a constitutional monarchy, basically. Make the king more like an honorary figure and have political participation in the country.
I was amazed that many educated reporters and academics adopted this view that Saudi Arabia is a religiously conservative society. It's very tribal, and also young people are economically lazy. They don't like to work. So there was this sort of Orientalist image about Saudis, and they concluded that only top-down reform can save this country from its ills. And they saw in Mohammed bin Salman as the savior, thinking that only top-down revolutions could change the situation. And I wanted to challenge that view because I show in the book how active Saudis are, how connected with the world, what their demands are. And there are several groups who called for some kind of political participation, transparency, and elected government. But they, unfortunately, by 2014, they were all in prison.